Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back for another Queen Charlotte of Bridgerton story review. This one is going to take a while because it was a longer episode and there's a lot to cover. Try to stay with me because we're going to be going from the past to the present a lot during this episode. So do me a favor, hit the like button as we begin. An opera singer is performing, and our narrator is back. She wasn't here in the last episode, but she's back this one. Dearest, gentle reader, much like a phoenix rising from the ashes, so too our queen rises from disaster. An army of eligible ladies have arrived at Her Majesty's doorstep, hopeful for betrothals to the monarch's sons. Royal weddings and babies cannot be far behind. We see the queen sitting by herself in an opera box. However, if reports from the high galleries are to be believed, Her Majesty's countenance lately evinces little pleasure. One wonders whether impending connubial bliss has shone a light on Her Majesty's own isolation. I said, that whistle down, man. She will say some stuff. While that is going on, you see Lady Bridgerton telling Lady Danbury that the queen must be one of the loneliest women in England, and she wonders if she misses companionship because she's always surrounded by all these other people, yet you don't see a man or her husband. Lady Danbury says in a very real way, she's a widow just like us. And that's sad when you think of it, because even though her husband is alive, because she gets glimpses of him, if you've watched the more recent episodes, you can see why Lady Danbury made this statement. It's true, because over the years, her husband has disappeared from her. It's nighttime, and we get a shot of the various ladies in their beds. Lady Bridgerton is in her bed, and she's by herself. The camera pans to the empty side of her bed where her husband would have been. We see Lady Danbury also alone. She gets up, goes into what would have been her husband's room, and she gets flashbacks of the past when they used to have sex. We then see Queen Charlotte. She rings her bell, jumps out of bed, and says to Brimsley, is he dead? Brimsley isn't sure, and she asks him to find out. My question to you guys is, because we see this happen often, even in the recent episodes where she's like, is he dead? Is she asking the question because she wants him to be gone? Or is she asking the question because she fears it and she's just trying to prepare herself for it? Because when she jumped up out of the bed in the episode, she seemed startled, like she had a scary dream or something like that. So it makes me wonder what comes behind it. We then hear our favorite narrator again. The world's doors open at the Queen's command. Every man and woman in British Empire obeys the Queen's whim. We would go to battle to save her, but what matter? The one thing Her Majesty needs most cannot be conquered by any army. That's when we flash back to the past, and the Queen, Charlotte, is alone, and she's panting as she wakes up startled. Loneliness is a battle. Even queens must fight for themselves. This is when we see Reynolds, and he's standing by the door as he hears King George calling out in pain. He's outside of the room, and he's cringing, but he's not entering. We then see people attend Lord Danbury's funeral. After the funeral, Coral asks if there's anything that Lady Danbury needs. And rather than saying what she needs, Lady Danbury talks about her kids and how they don't really seem to be upset about their father's passing. They went right to sleep. When we later see her kids, they're younger kids. So Lady Danbury was significantly younger than her husband. He was older, and they really didn't have a lot of time as a family. They went right to sleep, but she's struggling to sleep because she's sitting here trying to figure out what's next. She says, I was 3 when my parents promised me. when a deal was struck. 3 years old. So I was raised his wife. I was taught my favorite color was gold because his favorite color was gold. I was told my favorite foods were his favorite foods. I read only the books that he liked and learned his favorite songs on the pianoforte. I am drinking this port wine because it's his favorite, and therefore it must be mine. I have never once and as many times as I dreamed and imagined and hoped and planned, I never thought what it would actually be like to have him be gone, wiped from this earth. I was raised for him, and now I am new. I am brand new, and I don't even know how to breathe air he does not exhale. I said, wow, that is so wild to think that you, as a young child, everything that you were taught was for you to be prepared to marry this man that you had been promised to at the age of 3, to now where here she is, he's gone, and she doesn't even know what to do. She's not even accustomed to having what she wants because it's always been what about this man wants. That's crazy. Next, we see Queen Charlotte, and she's walking the garden. Brimsley tells Queen Charlotte that Princess Augusta, the king's mom, has arrived with Lord Bute and the royal physician. The queen doesn't want to see him, but it seems like she doesn't have any choice because the next thing we know, despite her refusal, we see her being examined by a doctor by what looks like some very uncomfortable instruments. They want to make sure that she's pregnant. The doctor confirms that she is indeed pregnant. Lord Bute is excited. He wants to announce it right away. But Princess Augusta's like, let's wait until the baby begins to move. She tells her that she'll be moved in near her right away because she carries the crown and she wants to make sure that the crown is protected, that the queen is safe. We later see Queen Charlotte, and she's in her chambers and she's writing a letter. Brimsley then takes that letter to Reynolds. He leaves it telling him to make sure that it's delivered to the king because he's supposed to deliver it himself, but nobody is allowed to see the king. And we know that the king is with the shady doctor. Reynolds, as he hears him crying out in pain, knocks on the door, and he's reminded that he is not supposed to bother Dr. Monroe while he's working. Reynolds says, look, I got a letter from the queen, and royal mail has to be delivered personally. Y'all aren't royal. I am. At least I'm the king's man. The assistant shuts the door. The door opens shortly after, and the king comes out, and he is visibly shaken, and he is trembling, and he attempts to reach like this for the letter, but Dr. Monroe says he's not ready. It's like he's being teased and taunted here because he knows that his wife is writing him, and he's not even letting him read it. George tells him, just go ahead and put it with the others. This is when we see Reynolds go to the conservatory, I believe it is, and he puts the letter with what we see is a pile of other letters that have been written, excuse me, from the queen, and they're all still sealed. Leave that. We see Lady Danbury, and she's laying in bed, and she's staring at the ceiling. Coral enters and says, you have visitors. She doesn't want to go. And she's like, look, I'm in mourning. I don't need to see anybody. But Coral says it's Lord and Lady Smythe Smith, along with the Duke of Hastings and other families from their side. There's a bunch of newly titled people that are hanging out in her living room waiting for her because they got questions. And their main question is what happens now. They say Lord Danbury is the first of their kind to die, and that the laws of succession are unclear when it comes to them, because normally what would happen is the male would get that lineage, or that title, I should say. But because they're new to this, they don't know what that means. So they're like, okay, Is your son, who's 4, gonna get it? Is he gonna be Lord Danbury? What happens next? And she's like, I don't know. But she knows it's important that she finds out, because she sets the precedent for all of them, since she is the first person of their kind, the brown kind, to have someone pass, and they just got this title. Lady Danbury immediately gets to work. She's looking all over the house in her husband's desk, because she's trying to find the name to the solicitor that her husband has so she can ask. So she's looking for his name. She finds it, and she says, okay, there's a possibility that he may not answer this if he knows that I'm a woman. So rather than signing it Lady Danbury, I'm just going to sign it Danbury. Smart, because you just don't know. It's looked at differently when you're a woman versus a man. And then that goes back to what we later see happen with Daphne later on, when she tries to make a signature to get information about Marie's baby daddy, and how that situation worked out. So seeing this and hearing that lets you know that Lady Danbury was always 2 steps ahead. We see Charlotte, and she's walking the halls trying to figure out why the king hasn't responded to her letters. She is being tortured with things like sitting and being painted while he's actually being tortured. She's being watched by his mom. Charlotte has been sitting in this chair in this one position for a long time as she's being painted, and the king is nowhere near her. This is supposed to be a wedding portrait that was supposedly requested by His Majesty, but both we and Charlotte know that His Majesty didn't request anything, that this is his mom's doing, especially because, unlike Charlotte, we know he's getting tortured. He shows her, the artist, that there's a large blank area where the king is meant to be, but he's not there to be painted. This is when she's looking at the picture and she tells him it's too light. I need you to paint it darker, like my skin. But the king's mother doesn't want the portrait to be darker. She actually gets up, looks at it, and she says that he paints it even lighter. The king wants her to glow. She needs to be pale. Keep in mind, she says it while Charlotte is sitting right there in the chair listening. She's trying her hardest once again to cover up Charlotte's ethnicity. It's very insulting, but Charlotte sits there and says nothing. She's basically becoming a shell of herself before our eyes. So she's frustrated, and we see her write another letter, but we find out that this one isn't going to the king. Brimsley reads it, then he reseals it, because she sealed it and he was supposed to deliver it, put it in the mail, but he didn't. He opened it up to see what was going on and sealed it back. He then meets with Reynolds because of what he read. He tells Reynolds there is a letter, but this one isn't for the king. Instead, she's writing to Duke Adolphus, her brother, asking him to take her back to Germany. She cannot leave without a male's protection, so she wants to make sure that he can do it. Brimsley's like, should I send this, or should I alert the king that this is what she's trying to do? And Reynolds at this point is feeling just as defeated as the queen. He's like, look, at this point, it's nothing you could do, so go ahead and send it. And Brimsley's looking at him like he's in shock, because not only are we both kingsmen, but we're partners, like we're together, and you're not even telling me what's going on. Everything is in danger right now of being messed up, and you're over here and you're keeping secrets from me. But he's not going to tell him what's going on. So we see it's another day. Lady Danbury decides that she's going to go for a walk. She's still in mourning, so she's really not supposed to be doing a whole bunch, but she wants to go for a walk. Cora wants to go with her, but Lady Danbury's like, no, I need to be alone. We see Lady Danbury, and she's walking around exploring her estate. She finds an old structure and she sits down. Her feet are hurting, so she takes off her shoes and she's rubbing her feet. As she's doing this, Lord Ledger, Violet's father, walks up, sees her, tells her those aren't the right shoes for Fields. and you're on my property. He promises, though, that he won't get the hounds on her for trespassing. He says that he walks often, but he calls it, I think he said brambles often. He tells her, she says that she had to get out. You know, she was tired of being in the house. He was like, I'm so sorry for your loss. She explained she couldn't stay in bed any longer. So here she is now on his estate. Lord Ledger says if it will make her feel better, but he recommends that tomorrow she wears different shoes and that they can walk together. Flash to the present, right? Charlotte has called on her sons to the palace to play matchmaker. She introduces William and Edward to these two ladies. Once they're gone, Queen Charlotte says, those ladies are your betrothed. They're noble, they're rich, and they're connected. They are perfect, and next week they're going to be your wives. William and Edward don't want to do this. They want to have a say in who they marry. We see them leave and they come back later. Queen Charlotte is ready to discuss the floral arrangements and stuff with them, but William and Edward tell her that there will be no wedding, that they've brought their brother, Prince George, with them because he's the eldest, and as him being the eldest male, and his father being incapacitated, he is in charge. According to the Royal Marriages Act of Parliament, he must approve all weddings, and he is offended that the Queen didn't consult him first. At least that's what he says. But Charlotte isn't worried about it because Charlotte knows her kids and Charlotte is accustomed to getting her way. So she says, you know, you're right. I'm sorry. I overstepped. And the sons are looking like, oh, she's actually admitted that she overstepped. She then says to George, you know, be a good boy and approve your brother's marriages. And he pauses and he's like, okay. He immediately approves it, taps them on the shoulders, and walks off. Meanwhile, they're sitting there dumbfounded like, did you just approve that? That's not what you were supposed to do. And she's laughing because she knows he was going to approve it. Okay, back to Lady Danbury in the present. Lady Danbury, Lady Bridgerton, they're in the gallery. Lady Danbury sees Lady Bridgerton looking at a painting of a young couple, which she calls it provocative. She says, she asks Lady Violet if she's okay because she's fanning herself as she's walking through. She says that she's fine, but she does admit to, you know, kind of being out of sorts. She says Anthony is on his honeymoon, Gregory is growing, Eloise is fighting with Penelope, so she's stomping around the house, and she's telling all these things, and Lady Danbury is like, that's not what's going on. What's really going on with you? She's timid at first, but then she finally says, you know, my garden is blooming, letting Lady Danbury know that she basically wants some sex. But Lady Danbury is not getting it at first because she's doing all this garden talk. She says she and her husband had a garden. It was a luscious garden. When he died, the garden died. But recently, it's began to bloom again and it wants things and it's becoming dangerous. She's becoming dangerous because she almost asked a footman to lay on top of her. I laughed so hard at this scene and at Lady Danbury because Lady Danbury chuckled. She was laughing at the fact that you're talking about something, you're so hot and bothered that you're ready to lay with the help, we'll say, right? And Violet is mortified by her laughter, so she's like, excuse me, and she leaves. Like she couldn't get out of there fast enough. This is when we go back to the past again, where Lady Danbury runs into Violet's father again. These two become instant friends. There is an obvious chemistry between the two of them. This time, though, she's wearing riding boots. They walk together and enjoy each other's company. This happens several times to the point where they are becoming friends. It's sometime later, Duke Adolphus arrives at the palace to see his sister. Queen Charlotte is happy to see him. Soon as Brimsley and the rest of the staff is out, she hugs her brother. He's happy to see that she's with child. She says, I'm glad you're happy, but I want to go. She tells him that George is nice, but she wants to go back to Germany. He says he can't take her because their marriages basically created an alliance between the both of their provinces. And he especially can't take her because she's carrying the royal baby. He's like, until your child is born, your body isn't your own. The thought of that would be infuriating to me, but this is the reality of their situation, especially with her being a royal. Leaving now, he says, would be treason and it would be considered kidnapping. He reminds her, because she wants to be back. She says, I want to be back with my family. He's like, King George is your family. He wants to know what's wrong. And she says, no, everything's okay. Even though she's mad, even though she feels betrayed, because at this point that she loves George, she's still not revealing what she could reveal. So back to Lady Danbury and Violet's daddy. Lady Danbury tells Lord Ledger that she might lose her title and her estate and her future happiness. She says, my husband is dead, but I'm burdened now with trying to figure out what I am as a woman that's not tied to a man. I'm on my own and I feel like the life that I want is out of reach. She's like, I just don't know what to do. My birthday is next week, but it's just going to be another day of mourning because they're expected in their society to mourn for a certain period of time. I don't feel like she's necessarily mourning because she's glad that he's gone. She's not missing him. He says, you know, even though you feel like you're alone and you don't know where to turn to and all those other things, you can still go out for rambles, the walks with him. They lean into each other like they're like this, right? So they're leaning in, they're like this, to the point where their noses touch. And right before they kiss, he excuses himself to leave. Their faces were so close together. I was like, ooh-wee. But then I had to remind myself, he's married. So this isn't good. It's not good. I don't like Violet's mama, but it's not good. So we see Lady Danbury back at her house. She's laying down when she's told there's a gentleman downstairs to see you. It's the solicitor. And he's no help at all. He has no idea if her late husband's title will pass on to the son. Normally he says it would pass, but because this whole situation is an experiment, I don't know what's going to happen. She also finds out that Lord Danbury might have lied about how much money he actually had because he was spending money left and right. He was buying horses and doing all these extra things. So for all she knows, she might not even have a lot of money left. She asks him what she should do. And he says, you can seek the kindness of a male relative or you can remarry. That is the answer to everything. Everything about this time period is contingent upon the males. I guess I'd be out back because I'm a single mom. So it just being my son. What would I do? Like perish the thought. I'm glad I'm where I'm at. It's for the lady to live off a man. So Lady Danbury is now alone in her husband's bedroom. And she's so frustrated that we see her repeatedly kick the bed as she throws stuff on the floor. I think it was a cover or something. Back at the palace, the princess thinks it's nice that Charlotte's brother came to see her because once Princess Augusta became a princess, she didn't get to see her family. When Queen Charlotte isn't reacting to her compliments, she blames her lack of reaction on confinement and says carrying a future king isn't easy. So she decides to kind of treat her. They go out. So we see Queen Charlotte, Duke Adolphus, and Princess Augusta enjoy a musical. Princess Augusta tells Queen Charlotte that she's done her duty, that she's carrying an heir, and she never has to see King George again if she doesn't want to, or till at least they need another heir. It's selfish because this isn't just about her being miserable. She's missing her husband, number one. Number two, you just look at her as a breeder, as an incubator, as a way to create all this life for the crown, but you're not concerned about her being the person that has to go through this. And she really wants to see him. We see her look sad as she says that. And then we see them walking down the hall. Charlotte, as usual, is 5 paces ahead of Brimsley. when she suddenly stops and she's taking deep breaths and we see her begin to cry. Brimsley at this point is so in tune with her that he knows that she's been off, and he holds up his hand like this. Y'all, it's so powerful. He holds up his hand like this while she's in front of him, right? And she's standing there. And even though he's not touching her and the hand is being held like this, you can see where there's like an adjustment to her, where there's like a comfort, even though he's not making contact. And to me, it's one of a few moving parts of the episode. When I first saw it, cried in that moment, because even though he wasn't touching her, you could tell that she felt it and she needed it, because you could see her head kind of tilt as he did it and stuff like that. It was a phenomenal moment. The actors on this series are phenomenal. They're brilliant. And even without saying anything, they're saying so much. So after that moment, standing there and doing that, she wipes her tears and she continues on her path. So it's another day. You see Brimsley has obviously requested for Reynolds to come because the dramatic music is playing while Reynolds rides his horse. He arrives and Brimsley is showing him all the things that he's put in place in the palace so that the king could come back. He shows how he cleaned off the walls, and he says we could set up something in case, the king decides to go outside and take off his clothes to look at the stars again. Like, he's trying to make a way for them to reunite. He tells Reynolds that the queen may need to see the king's doctor again because he's worried about her mental health. And Reynolds refuses. Brimsley is upset because he knows that his partner is keeping secrets, and he leaves and goes back to the king. Reynolds goes back and he can hear the water as it splashes, and he can hear the king's screams. He forces his way into the room that he's in, saying he's the king's man, and I will see the king. And he sees him as he's being repeatedly dunked in water. And you hear again and again and again as he's being dunked and dunked and dunked. And he's trying to stop it. But there's 3 guys to him, and they force him out, slamming him against the wall. And he sits in the hallway in agony, basically, as he's listening to his king in pain. We then flash to Lady Danbury watching her children play with their nanny. We see her take off her mourning veil, and then we go back to the present. Violet meets Lady Danbury, and she apologizes for the day before. Lady Danbury feels that it was brave of Violet to open up herself in the way that she did. They spend time together all the time, she says, matchmaking and talking about things that really don't matter, but they never really talk about, the mature stuff that women, go through. She thanks her for her honesty the previous day. Then she takes Violet to see one of her favorite works. It's King George and Queen Charlotte. She says, whose garden is always in bloom. And Violet's like, it's always in bloom, even with, the king being, And she's like, yes, it always is. They all have gardens. She's like, we all have gardens. Hers didn't die with her husband because it never had been planted. She didn't know that she could have one until after he was gone. And when she did have one, she nurtured it fiercely. What Violet doesn't realize is she's talking about her daddy. She's sitting there telling this girl how fierce it was when she's talking about her father, but we'll get to it. So Violet says that she's never thought of, another man in that way, but she wants to be gardened as much as possible. She's feeling it. She's feeling frisky. That's the end of that. We then see back in the past where Brimsley is asking the queen if they should replant the actual garden, and she says no, let it die. As he hears her say that, he knows that she's unhappy and he knows that she wants to leave. So he says, you can't leave England. And she tells him, you'll have to stay here or you'll be blamed. Meaning, I'm doing something. I'm not staying up in here. She then asks where Princess Augusta is. He says, she's out at the Modiste. And next thing we know, the queen is running. We see Lady Danbury as the Danbury nanny is getting Dominique, her son, ready. Dominic, her son, ready. They leave, but he just wants to hurry up and get back to his nanny. This is when we find out that Lady Danbury hasn't really raised her kids. She says, I know it's scary for you to leave nanny, but I'm your mother. Your father is gone, and now you're the man of the family. And as a family, for the family, he needs to do his duty. He says, okay. And she brings him to meet the princess. She walks in. She says, I thought it high time, Your Highness, that you met my son, Lord Danbury. Right? She knows what she's doing. You see the princess, and as she looks at him, because he looks great, and he's so respectful when he speaks, he says, it's a pleasure to meet you, Your Highness. And you see how she's looking like, yes, she's impressed. And she goes to call him Lord Danbury, and Lord Bute is like, there's an issue of inheritance. That's not settled yet. You can't call him that. So they're sent away. As they leave, he wants to make sure that he did his duty. And Lady Danbury gets down eye level with him, and she says, you come from warriors. We win. Never forget that. He gives her a tiny nod, and they leave the palace hand in hand. Now we see Lord Ledger, Violet's daddy, at his house, and he's over there and he's making birthday hats, but it's not for Violet. Instead, it's for a friend. Violet tells him, you never make them for friends. And he was like, well, this friend is special. She's been sad. I want to cheer her up. So he's starting to doubt whether or not he should do it. And she's like, yeah, your hats bring joy. They bring cheer. He said no one should be sad on their birthday. So she's like, can I help? And he says, no, I need to do this one on my own. So she's like, okay, well, you should add some flowers to it because everybody loves those. And he does. We then see Lady Danbury arrive home to find the queen waiting on them. I think my notes are out of order, but y'all just go with me if I get to, because I think I'm missing a part, but we'll get to it. Lady Danbury arrives home to find the queen waiting on them. She's there because she's trying to get away from the princess. Queen Charlotte offers her condolences. She says her famous sorrows and prayers. Lady Danbury is like, you should be at home resting. Charlotte starts to cry and says, that palace is not home. She has no home. She's left and she's never going back. Lady Danbury says, where will you go? And she's like, I'm here. Like, that's where I'm at. I'm here, which is a big deal. Lady Danbury goes to Carol and says, the queen means to stay. And Carol's excited, but she's like, no, this isn't good. She is carrying the air. I can't be responsible for her. And asking her staying is asking me to commit treason. She needs to go get a footman sent to Buckingham House so that someone could come over there. She always thinks ahead. In the meantime, we see Lady Danbury, and she's sitting outside of this room that the queen is in, and she's blocking the door. As the stuff is going down, the Duke Adolphus is pissed at Brimsley because he's blaming him for losing the queen. And he's like, look, she's not lost. I know her circumstances. I'm capable of handling this situation. If foreigners would stay out of my way, I'd be able to handle it. He calls for the carriage. The brother apologizes. Back at Lady Danbury's, Queen Charlotte is rubbing her stomach and she's talking to her baby. Lady Danbury comes in and tells her Brimsley is there. So is her brother. Queen doesn't want to see them. Lady Danbury's like, look, your problems won't be resolved in this room. Charlotte says, I want to tell you what's bothering me, but I can't. I've been lied to and betrayed by everyone in this country except you. You're my only friend. And Lady Danbury is like, I'm not your friend, but I want to be your friend. She tells, I've been acting as your subject, but I want to act as your friend. And she's like, I've been acting in a manner that hasn't really considered your feelings, which goes to her working hand in hand with the princess and stuff like that. But Lady Danbury was looking out for herself, but she also was helping the queen too. She's like, if we need to be friends, queen, we got to start over because I need a friend too. Queen Charlotte says, Lady Danbury, I'll be your friend. Will you be my friend? And they are. I love this series. I love it. I love the layers that it covers. So Queen Charlotte says, this isn't the life that I wanted. Lady Danbury talks about women and how, men always know what they want, but they never consider the women's desires and dreams. If they want to live their own lives, they have to start making the men think of them, which means it's time for us to take our stand. So Queen Charlotte thanks Lady Danbury for her hospitality. You see an exchange with them where they're holding hands, they're eye to eye. Her hands are like near her stomach. Then she walks off, and the Duke, Adolphus, her brother, thanks her for her discretion and her grace. Back to the present, we see Prince Edward and Prince William standing waiting to be married. Prince William goes to Queen Charlotte and says that he's afraid that he won't be able to love her. And we get this beautiful moment from the Queen. She says, love isn't something someone is able or not able to do based on magic. It's determination, a choice one makes. You take someone in marriage and you choose to love them. You don't give yourself any other option. Marriage is difficult and the life of a royal is lonely. So grab someone, grab your someone and hang on. You love and you love hard, because if you don't, you're lost. It's a glimpse of her caring, and it also explains her relationship with her husband, because in order to be with someone who has the mental difficulties that he does, to be with someone who has forced her to be in this lonely life, she has to have loved him. The brides are being led in, and we see the prince walk into his place. One of the are they princes? I know Prince George is a prince. Yeah, he's a prince. We see one of them walk into his place. He's just not first in line for his father's seat, but he's a prince. Back to the past. Duke is lecturing the Queen about what she should and shouldn't do and all this other stuff. And she's like, look, I don't need you to lecture me. She stops before she enters the palace, and she tells the Duke, look, you sold me off to be the Queen of England, so let me be the Queen of England. She tells Brimsley, get her carriage ready. We then see Lady Danbury. She's about to leave, and Violet's dad is standing outside the door. He gives her the birthday hat that he made for her. He says he didn't want her birthday to pass without celebrating her. She's like, you can't be here. He's like, I'm not there. She says, you can't come in. He says he doesn't have any intention of coming in. She's like, you must be quiet. And he promises not to make a sound because he isn't there and he's not coming inside. Oh, yes, he is. She opens the door. He comes inside, and they don't even wait to get into a room. They start kissing right there and then. We're then back to the present, where Lady Danbury is searching her home. She finds this box. She opens it and smiles. Then we're back to the past. We see Reynolds greet Queen Charlotte. She asks him where the king is. He tells her the king can't see her now. Dr. Monroe then reiterates that it's impossible for her to see King George right now. She insists and says, either I'm going to see him or I'm going to have my man search this entire palace if you don't take me there. Reynolds then takes her to the king. Queen Charlotte walks in the door. She hears him screaming with a gag in his mouth as he is being tortured. This time they are lighting a poker with like a bulb at the end of it that is bright red, and they are pressing it against his leg and burning him while he is restrained. She says, untie him, which they do. He gets up, looks relieved, and falls into her arms. She orders everyone out of the room now. Once they're alone, Queen Charlotte and him have a beautiful moment. She says, look, George, it's me. He's murmuring. She's like, it's Venus. Venus is here. Venus is here, George. Venus is here. She's like, damn it, Venus. I'm not Venus. I'm Charlotte. I am Charlotte. And I need you to be George again. I need you to try. Come back to me, please, George. Come back. Come back. You hear him murmuring. She's like, George, come back. Come back. Do you feel that? And she puts like his hand against her stomach. And she says, do you feel that? It kicks. I am Charlotte. This is our child, and we need you to be George again, or none of us are anyone. You hear him say, Charlotte. She says, George. He says, Charlotte. And they kiss. And I said, oh my goodness. To be tortured herself in her brain and then see him physically being tortured and then know this is probably what he's been going through all this time had to make her feel away. But Charlotte loves that man and she's going to stand by him. Dr. Monroe tells her that despite his methods, he does want the king to be sane as much as she does. And she's like, look, I don't care about his sanity at this point. What I care about is his happiness and his soul. If he needs to be mad, then he can be mad. She then orders the doctor removed from the grounds and tells him to be grateful that she doesn't destroy him. She then goes to Reynolds, tells him, get him a warm bath, get him food and clothes. She tells Brimley that they need to pack all the things because they're moving to Q, which means I'm taking over. I'm not going to be watched by his mama. I'm going to do what the queen wants to do. We then see Lord Ledger and Lady Danbury having sex. Like, they're excited. This is the most excited we've seen her. We then go to the present where Lady Danbury pulls the birthday hat that Lord Ledger made for her out of the box as she's having flashbacks. She is looking up in the ceiling in the past like she did before with her husband, but she's having a good time. Next thing you know, she is on top. She tells him to stop and she gets on top and she is riding him till she climaxes, and they're both smiling and she's excited because this is her first orgasm. And then we flash back to the present where she's standing there with the hat and she's smiling as she remembers this moment with Violet's daddy. And that is how we end. You all let me know what you thought about this one. There was a lot to unpack in this one, and I wanted to make sure that I got it all in. Tell me what you thought. I just feel like this series right here, this season in particular, got better with every episode because of how great the actors were, how awesome the music was, the costumes. It just chef's kiss. Until next time.